Hi. She dropped it into conversation as if it were nothing. But nothing had the weight of a stone when it landed like that. It was Thursday night. I had come home later than usual, last-minute contracts at the office. The kind of day where you want your house to feel like refuge, not another place where you have to watch your footing. Dinner was on the table. She had cooked her pasta dish, one she hadn't made in months. It smelled too good, the kind of thing meant to cover for something else. We sat. I poured wine. She poured out the news. Jenna's moving in for a little while. No build-up. No preamble. Just that. Her tone bright, almost too bright. The words fast, as if speeding past my reaction before I could have one. I kept my face neutral, fork poised above the plate. She's been through hell with Brian, she went on. She needs space, time to heal. It's temporary, obviously. A sip of wine to chase it down. Her eyes darted to mine for half a second, measuring, then away again. Of course, I said, my voice steady, nothing sharp in it. If that's what you think she needs. Under the table, my fingers curled tighter around my glass. There had been no conversation about this. No, what do you think? No, should we talk about it first? Just decided. Announced. Done. But what caught me wasn't the announcement. It was what happened when Jenna arrived an hour later. I heard her voice before the knock, laughing, light. The kind of laugh you give when you're already comfortable with the space you're walking into. When I opened the door, they were side by side, Jenna's hand on her arm, casual but lingering. A gym bag slung over Jenna's shoulder. No suitcase. No sign of a rushed escape from a breakup. Just planned. They glanced at each other as they came in. Not the look of a guest seeking comfort from a friend. Something else. A flicker too fast, too practiced. We did the motions. I carried her bag to the guest room. Jenna hugged me, too warmly, her breath near my ear. Thank you for letting me crash here. I nodded. Of course. But already my instincts were pricking. Later that evening, the three of us sat in the living room. Wine opened again. Conversation that tried too hard to be casual. They laughed more with each other than with me. Finished each other's sentences in ways I hadn't seen before. A closeness that felt rehearsed. At one point, Jenna got up to fetch a blanket and returned wearing my wife's oversized cardigan. The one that normally hung on our bedroom chair. I watched that small detail, filed it away. When they finally called it a night, I remained downstairs under the pretense of finishing some work emails. In truth, I needed space. Time to think. Around midnight I went upstairs. On my way to our bedroom, I paused. There was light under the guest room door, left ajar. Voices. I stepped lightly. Jenna's voice was soft, melodic. My wife's voice lower than usual, almost a whisper. I couldn't make out the exact words. Just the tone, familiar, intimate. The kind of voice you use when the rest of the world is supposed to be shut out. Then a laugh. Stifled. A pause that spoke louder than any sentence. I stood in the hallway longer than I should have, cup of water in hand, the sound of their closeness pressing against my ribs like a weight. Finally, I turned and walked to our bedroom. I closed the door quietly. Sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. The ceiling above me blurred. My mind didn't. Something was off, deeply off, and pretending it wasn't would be the first mistake. I had spent my life trusting my instincts, in business, in people, in her. And now, those instincts were screaming in the quiet of my house. The question was no longer whether to listen. It was how to act without being seen. The next morning, I woke before either of them. Not by accident. I've always been an early riser, habit from my old consulting days. You learn to move through a house quietly when needed. You learn when to let a moment pass and when to lean in. That morning I leaned in. I came downstairs to make coffee. The sun wasn't fully up, just that pale gray light filtering through the blinds. Halfway through grinding the beans, I heard the soft thud of feet on the stairs. Jenna, wearing my wife's robe. She padded into the kitchen, hair up, eyes barely open. Not self-conscious, not asking permission. Like she belonged. She reached for a mug before I could offer. Morning, she said, voice sleep-warm. Morning, I answered, tone light, filing it all away. She poured her coffee and wandered off, humming. Left me standing there with the sudden sense that I was the guest in my own house. By the time my wife came down, the two of them had curled into the living room together. I watched from the doorway, unseen. Jenna's legs tucked under her, robe loose. My wife's arm draped across the back of the couch behind her. Their laughter quiet, close. I stepped back before they noticed, breathed, watched the clock. At 9 sharp, they ran to the store. A quick grocery run, according to her. They were gone for 3 hours. When they returned, there were 2 bags of groceries, and 1 boutique shopping bag with no store name, the kind you get from specialty places downtown. I helped unload without comment. My wife moved that bag upstairs without a word. The pattern began to emerge faster than I expected. By Monday, Jenna had stopped sleeping in late. She was now in step with my wife's routine: morning runs, joined yoga sessions in the living room, long drives, to clear their heads, always together, always gone for hours. I noticed other shifts, separate laundry loads. Her stuff's delicate, my wife said offhandedly when I asked why the hamper was now divided. Her phone, once left on the counter or nightstand, was now glued to her hand. Bathroom, backyard, everywhere. At dinner, Jenna would often stand close behind her while cooking, hand brushing the small of her back in passing. Not friendship casual. Not anymore. And in the midst of it all, me? Watching. Recording. I didn't use cameras. No apps. No tech. Instead, I opened an old leather-bound notebook and began writing. Date, time, observation. No commentary. Just facts. Thursday. Grocery run lasted 4 hours. Friday. Boutique bag spotted again, now in closet. Saturday. Separate laundry started. Sunday. Jenna seen wearing wife's robe again. Morning. It wasn't paranoia. It was discipline. And discipline was the only thing that would keep me from making a mistake. Then came the first concrete clue. I was pulling my coat from the closet when something slipped from the inner pocket. An unfamiliar receipt. Luxury boutique, high-end downtown. Date, 2 days prior. Total, 4 figures. Charged to our joint account. My wife had told me they were using an old gift card when they window shopped that weekend. Said it in passing, smiled too casual. But this wasn't a window shop. It wasn't Jenna's style either. Jenna lived in workout gear and casual clothes. I placed the receipt into the notebook, logged it, sat back in my office and stared at the growing list. And beneath the cold facts, another layer was spreading, quiet and bitter. The woman who once trusted me with every secret now held her phone like a shield. The house we built together was slowly becoming something else. Not a home. A stage. And somewhere beneath it all, a part of me still hoped it wasn't what it looked like. But that part was losing ground, fast. I told myself it was just a gathering. An afternoon of polite smiles and overcooked burgers. A place where nothing would happen. But when instinct won't shut up, you listen. The invitation came from Marcy, one of my wife's old yoga friends. Sunday barbecue, backyard, bring whatever you want. I almost declined. Work was piling up, but my gut said go. Be present. Watch. It was the first time we'd been out socially since Jenna moved in. That alone made it worth attending. I drove us there. The entire way, they were locked in their own bubble. Jenna in the passenger seat, my wife driving. Quiet laughter over some in-joke. I sat in the back seat, the third wheel in my own marriage. When we arrived, the pattern continued. I carried the cooler. They floated inside, greeted with hugs and wine glasses. They blended seamlessly with the group, moving in tandem. I let them drift ahead and stay near the back porch. The house was one of those new builds, open floor plan, big sliding doors onto the deck, no corners to hide in, which meant it was perfect for observation. I settled near the drinks table and watched. My wife and Jenna moved together like a single unit. Shared glances. Subtle touches. No hesitation. Anyone watching could see the bond had shifted beyond casual friendship, but it was dressed in just enough ambiguity to keep polite company from commenting. I kept my face neutral, made small talk with a couple of acquaintances, all the while noting the details. How my wife leaned into Jenna's space. How Jenna's gaze lingered too long. Then the moment that changed everything. I was inside refilling my glass when I heard Jenna's voice from just around the kitchen corner, close, laughing, casual. She was talking to Marcy and another woman. The conversation drifted in fragments. Then, clear as a bell, Jenna said, "We're figuring out how to make this work long term." That slammed into me harder than I'd expected. Not, "She needs me." Not, "I'm helping her get through this." I stood perfectly still, glass halfway to the tap. My pulse jumped in my throat. I forced myself to finish the pour slowly, no visible reaction. Then I walked back onto the deck, outwardly calm, the words still ringing in my head. I stayed another half hour, methodically observing, gathering more of the picture. But the shape of it was already clear. At home later that night, after they'd disappeared into the guest room to watch a movie, I moved to phase 2. Not tech. No need. Simpler was better. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. She'd forgotten I handled the taxes, that I'd memorized the logins years ago. I paged back through the last 2 months of statements. The pattern hit fast. 3 weeks ago, just before Jenna's move-in, sudden regular Friday cash withdrawals, $800, $900, always just below the $1,000 mark that would flag for certain reports. Before that, nothing. We'd been using the joint account mainly for large, transparent purchases. I cross-referenced the dates. Not grocery runs, not utilities. Straight cash, unaccounted for. I opened my notebook and began logging the entries: date, amount, withdrawal location, page after page. No assumptions, just facts. By the time I closed the laptop, the numbers were burned into my mind. And what cut deeper than the theft itself was the memory layered underneath it. A year ago, we had sat in this same room late at night, wine open, sketching ideas for a cafe. Her dream, my drive. A place of our own. We had even toured potential spaces last fall. The down payment had been quietly growing in our savings. Now that money was quietly draining, deliberate, methodical, into whatever plan Jenna and my wife had built behind closed doors and long grocery runs. False normalcy returned in force the next morning. The three of us sat at the breakfast table. My wife made omelets. Jenna scrolled through her phone, feet tucked under her. They talked about yoga classes, new recipes, weekend hikes. My wife smiled at me as she poured my coffee, her hand brushing my shoulder lightly. The same old affection, perfectly rehearsed. I smiled back. Even managed a small laugh when Jenna made a snide joke about Brian's latest dating disaster. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. I wasn't hoping anymore. I was preparing. The notebook lay in my desk drawer, half full. The bank statements were saved. The observations were stacking up. And now, for the first time, the thought surfaced clear as daylight. This isn't salvageable. I didn't want it to be true. But a partnership built on deception wasn't a partnership anymore. And the moment to act was coming faster than they knew. Some betrayals announced themselves slowly, through glances, whispers, patterns. Others hit like a blindside punch. This one came from a man I hadn't seen in years. It was a chance encounter. A Tuesday afternoon, hardware store downtown. I needed replacement bulbs and caulk. Mundane errands to clear my head. I was waiting at checkout when I heard my name. Hey! Thought that was you. I turned. It was Craig Miller, old acquaintance, real estate agent. We'd met years ago through a mutual client. Hadn't spoken in ages. We shook hands, traded pleasantries. Then, casually, he said, "So, I hear Jenna's getting her name on your house? That'll be interesting." I blinked, forced a chuckle. "What?" Craig smiled. "Oh, you didn't know? Sorry, ran into your wife last week. She mentioned consulting about adding Jenna for support during recovery, I think she said. Didn't realize it wasn't finalized yet." A cold weight settled in my chest, but I kept my tone light. Probably one of her ideas in progress. We haven't discussed it." Craig shrugged, oblivious. "Well, good luck with all that. Take care." He walked away. I stood frozen by the checkout, heart hammering. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was premeditated financial sabotage. I drove home on autopilot, mind racing. There was no room for denial now. She wasn't just siphoning cash. She was attempting to rewrite legal ownership of our home. The same home we had both worked years to secure. And now Jenna, barely a guest, was poised to gain a stake in it. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my entire strategic approach had shifted. I wasn't documenting for peace of mind anymore. I was documenting for legal war. I started digging that night. No sleep, no distractions. Just cold, methodical research. First, I checked recent property records. Nothing filed yet. But if she was consulting, it meant she was laying groundwork. Then emails. I knew better than to snoop her personal account, but our family email, shared for household business, sometimes caught forwarded legal notices. Buried in the inbox was a thread with a local family law office. Not our usual attorney. Initial inquiry, casual tone. Exploring options for co-occupancy and supportive tenancy. The signature? A junior partner from a firm we'd both known through friends. Conflict of interest, my mind flagged immediately. I printed the thread, logged the date. Next came a full review of our accounts, joint savings, even her old personal card I still had online visibility to. The siphoning was worse than I thought. Several luxury purchases, boutique furniture deposit, more cash withdrawals, and each entry lined up with key dates since Jenna's arrival. This wasn't impulsive. This was a plan. The hardest part came the next morning, pretending normal. I ate breakfast with them. Coffee. Chatter. My wife smiled, her movements fluid, affectionate on the surface. But now I could see it, the cracks, forced intimacy. Jenna's sweetness turned slightly performative, as if rehearsed for an audience. Every touch, every glance was a signal, not to me, but between them. They thought they had time. They thought they had control. And I let them believe it. That afternoon, I took my first countermeasure. I contacted a senior property attorney, a friend of a trusted colleague. Quiet meeting, off record. Laid out the facts. Retained services. Began steps to lock down the property title and restructure joint accounts. I also scheduled a private meeting with our usual family lawyer. When I presented the email thread, the bank records, and the timeline from my journal, she paled. "You know this creates a conflict," she said carefully. "I know. That's why you're seeing it first." She agreed to formally withdraw from representing both parties in any future action, thereby cutting off my wife's quiet back-channel move. By evening, my position was secured. The house was protected. The accounts were legally frozen to prevent further siphoning. My documentation was airtight. Now it was a matter of patience. At home, they moved through the evening unaware. Jenna laughing in the kitchen. My wife lighting candles at dinner. I watched them with a calm I didn't fully understand yet. Not anger, something sharper. A cold readiness. They thought they had orchestrated this beautifully. But they'd forgotten the one thing I'd always been better at than either of them: strategy. The house felt colder after I made my moves. Not in temperature, summer was settling in, but in tone. Once you've seen betrayal laid bare, every smile feels like a weapon. And the smiles kept coming. At dinner, Jenna teased me about work. My wife laughed easily, reaching for my hand across the table. The same hand that had signed inquiries to lawyers on Jenna's behalf. I played my role perfectly, engaged but calm, observant but not distant. No slip-ups. If they suspected anything had changed, they didn't show it. But behind the scenes, I had shifted from observer to actor. The first concrete action came the next morning. I met again with the property attorney. He had expedited the paperwork. Temporary restriction placed on the title to prevent unauthorized alterations. Full ownership reaffirmed in my name. Locked under legal notice pending upcoming filings. The house was mine again, on paper and in fact. Next came the financial firewall. The joint account was formally restructured, requiring dual authorization for any withdrawal over a set amount. Secondary accounts were secured. Automatic transfers disabled. Their siphoning pipeline had been quietly shut off. I also retained a forensic accountant, trusted, discreet, to prepare a timeline of financial irregularities. When combined with my personal journal, the picture would be undeniable. But the most delicate piece was the family lawyer. When I met her privately, she didn't mince words. "She's trying to set up a false emotional tenancy claim," she said, pointing to the email thread. "It's flimsy. But if you hadn't caught it now, it could have gained ground." We prepared a formal statement of conflict of interest, served to both parties. Effective immediately, the lawyer could no longer advise my wife on any aspect of property or joint assets. One leg of their plan, gone. At home, the waiting began. And it wasn't easy. They were still acting out the charade. Movie nights, shared yoga classes, long brunches. Every moment was a test of control. I had to endure the subtle gestures between them, each more deliberate than the last. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The sideways glances that thought they were unseen. But the longer I waited, the more their false confidence grew. They believed they were tightening their grip. They didn't see the ground shifting under them. Then came the moment I knew would set the trap perfectly. It was a Sunday. Bright, hot. They decided to host a small brunch. Just us, no guests. I agreed easily. Watched as they prepared together, moving through the kitchen in perfect sync. I played the part. Chatted about work, complimented the food, asked about their latest yoga class. Each question designed to reinforce their belief that I was still in the dark. And then, just as the meal was winding down, Jenna struck. Her tone was casual, too casual, her words rehearsed. She glanced at my wife, then said lightly, "You know, maybe it's time to make things more comfortable around here. What if he took some space for a while? Just until things settle." The words hung in the air like smoke. My wife froze for a fraction of a second, just enough to confirm everything. That was the line. I stood slowly, walked to my office, returned with a folder in hand. Calm. No raised voice. No dramatics. I laid the property title on the table between us. Met both their eyes. "You wanted to heal this house?" I said quietly. "You don't own it. You won't." The silence was deafening. My wife opened her mouth, closed it. Jenna's face flushed, eyes darting to her for direction. Then the excuses began. "It was all for emotional safety," my wife said quickly. "You're misunderstanding. This wasn't about taking anything from you." I opened the folder, pulled out the timeline of withdrawals, the lawyer's conflict notice, the boutique receipts, the journal pages, and read them aloud, slowly, each fact landing like a hammer. When I finished, I closed the folder, looked them both in the eye. "Rule this house if you can afford it," I said, then turned and walked out. The trap was set. The fallout was coming, and I was ready. For the next 48 hours, the house operated like a bad stage play, everyone knowing their lines, no one believing the performance. Jenna and my wife moved carefully around me, their usual easy closeness replaced by guarded exchanges. The brunch confrontation had landed harder than they'd expected. I kept my routine steady, went to work, came home, ate dinner with them in near silence. Never raised my voice, never deviated. But the shift was unmistakable. Jenna no longer wore my wife's robe in the mornings. The grocery runs stopped cold. My wife's phone remained glued to her side, but now with nervous glances each time it buzzed. And through it all I waited. Because there was one more move they hadn't made yet. And when it came, I needed to be there to see it. It happened the following Sunday. The day began deceptively normal. Breakfast, light chores, my wife suggesting a movie night. But the undercurrent was there. Tight shoulders, clipped smiles. They knew they were on unstable ground. By midday, Jenna grew bold again. False confidence always resurfaces when cornered. We were sitting in the living room, an awkward attempt at casual. The conversation stumbled until Jenna, voice too bright, leaned toward my wife and said, "Honestly, it's still tense here. You'd both feel better if he just took some space for a bit." A direct challenge this time. No soft phrasing. No pretense. I was standing in the doorway, close enough to hear every word. That was the trigger I'd been waiting for. I entered the room deliberately. Calm. Every step measured. They both looked up, my wife's eyes widening slightly, Jenna's mouth half open as if to walk it back. But I didn't give them the chance. I set the full property file on the coffee table, slowly. "You wanted this house to be part of your healing?" My voice was low, even. "You don't own it. And you won't." The air seemed to thicken. Either of them moved. Then my wife began, voice strained but controlled. "You've misunderstood. This wasn't about." I raised a hand, opened the file. One by one, I laid out the pieces, the title lock, the financial timeline, the lawyer's conflict notice, the recorded withdrawals, the boutique receipt, my journal pages. I read each aloud. Methodically. No accusation, just proof. When I finished, I closed the folder. Met my wife's gaze fully. "Whatever you thought you were building here, financially, legally, personally, it ends now," I said quietly. "This house, this marriage, both deserve honesty. You gave neither." She sat frozen. Jenna's face had turned pale, her earlier bravado drained. There was no denial left to offer, no spin that could cover this. I stood, looked at them both once more. "Rule this house if you can afford it." The words landed flat, final. Then I left the room. Upstairs, alone, I allowed the first real breath in hours. Not relief, there was no relief in this, but clarity. A cold, undeniable clarity. There was no going back. Not from this. Not for any of us. Fallout isn't like in the movies. One explosion, then silence. It's waves, some loud, some subtle. Some that hit you when you least expect them. The first wave was legal. I filed for divorce 2 days after the confrontation. Quietly. Efficiently. My lawyer had the papers prepared in advance. No dramatic courtroom scenes, just paperwork, hard and cold. My wife was served at home. Jenna was present. I didn't need to be there to witness their reaction, The house echoed with tense silence when I returned later that night to gather personal files. By then, the damage to their plans was irreversible. Jenna's attempt to claim emotional tenancy on the house was swiftly shut down. The property attorney had anticipated it. Every document was in order. The junior lawyer who had advised my wife, now facing professional scrutiny for conflict of interest. The firm issued a formal apology. Jenna tried another angle, claiming contributions to household support during her stay. My forensic accountant's report buried that argument. Every withdrawal, every expense traced and documented. In the end, she had no legal footing. But legal victories don't erase social ones, and in a community as tightly wound as ours, word spreads faster than any filing. At first, the story trickled out through mutual friends. Whispers of unexpected divorce, financial mess. Then came the full picture. Someone leaked enough details that the truth surfaced. An attempted asset grab disguised as emotional recovery. Not about orientation, no one cared about that. It was about deception, about betrayal, about money. Friends began distancing. Invitations dried up. Old social circles quietly fractured. My wife's carefully curated image as the loyal friend, the devoted partner, shattered. Thank you for watching. Bye.